our conversation today. The title of our forum is Because It Means Something to Us, Connecting the Dots with the Communities We Research. And we have four fantastic graduate students who are presenting today on this topic. Lynette Correa Velez, Kendra Nalu Bega, apologies, um, tongue got in the way there, Cecilia Von Guy, and Susan Akwal. And we had some preliminary conversations as to what does this mean, and so we coordinated some questions for today's conversation. Um, um, Dr. Jessica Lee, who's our new interim associate dean for research, is going to ask the questions alongside me. Christopher Spann, who's the associate dean for graduate programs, and we look forward to hearing the responses of our colleagues and graduate students who are engaging in this very important and timely subject. And hopefully we will have enough time so we can entertain questions from the audience as well. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with our forum, um, this is our third forum. We anticipate having at least one more this semester for the College of Education. And the forum, or the focus of the forum, grew out of the call to action by the Chancellor of the University, who asked us to identify the differing ways our university and its capacity are addressing systemic racism or advancing social justice. And so here is our third conversation around that very subject as it relates specifically to the kind of research and public engagement we see from our graduate students in the College of Education. So with that, I'm going to kind of open us up for our first question. And I'm going to ask if each of you, our presenters, can introduce yourselves, your research, and if you can, share the reason why it means something to us, resonates with you as a researcher. And perhaps I can get you to go in the order that I named you in that sense. Lynette, Kendra, Cecilia, and then Susan.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Spann and Kathy and everyone else involved in today's presentation virtually. As they say in my hometown of Boston, Massachusetts, I'm wicked excited to be co-panelist with such amazing practitioner scholars today. So greetings, everyone. My name's Lynette Correa Velez. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and ella. I'm a third year doctoral student in EPOL, but in particular in the Diversity and Equity in Education with a focus and emphasis in Human Resource Development program at U of I. And I'm also an alum of the College of Education at U of I with my MED in HRD. And I know I'm so excited. Thank you, Dr. Spann. With my MED in HRD and a focus and emphasis in management of e-learning for workplace learning and training. I also have my BS in HRM, Human Resource Management, Business Management, and a minor in psychology from a small liberal arts, all women's college at the time called Lesley College. And as I mentioned, I am from Boston, Massachusetts. I do identify as Puerto Rican, and so my doctoral research was very much influenced by not only my intersectional identities, but what I've done professionally. I've been a career coach and in career development for the past 17 years, and currently the assistant director of career development at Northeastern Illinois University, located in Chicago, Illinois. And since the retirement of our director this past September, I am very much putting into practice a DEI-AB centered career development office. So really, truly putting into practice what I'm learning within my doctoral research and studies and courses into practice at the institution that I'm currently employed. So of course, as you can imagine, my doctoral research will be hopefully in looking at the practices and policies of Latino, Latina, Latinx leadership in career services, career development in higher education, more specifically in Hispanic serving institutions. And it's something that is very exciting for me to research, but also simultaneously very difficult since the topic has not really been researched on or spoken about. So hopefully we'll see what happens when I continue in my own doctoral process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Kendra Nalabega Booker, and I'm currently a third-year PhD student in curriculum and instruction. My concentration is on language and literacy. And to give a little bit of a background on myself and why I'm passionate about language and literacy in my community, I was born in Rwanda and I grew up in Uganda for about 14 years before I moved here in 2010. And since then, I remember my first I guess eye opener was when I took the WIDA access exam for being placed into an English language program. And coming from a pre-colonial education system, I realized that a lot of the linguistic background I came with was not really taken into consideration as far as my testing and my capabilities as a English speaker who ended up placing in a language program. So starting then, I realized that I had to kind of really work hard and prove myself in order to get out of that program and feel challenged in a more appropriate level of English or just mainstream classes. And when I was in ESL, I connected with a lot of students, not only African students, but other students who come from multi-diverse languages in their homes. And I realized that we shared some of the same concerns. So going to college, I got my bachelor's in linguistics, and I continued on for my master's in curriculum and instruction, again, concentrating on language and literacy. So my research has really been focusing on that access to appropriate testing, or at least the measures that are in place right now for making sure we do accurate testing on African immigrants and making sure they're placed in the appropriate levels for their proficiency. So that's what I'm really working on and connecting in my community to see what is done here in the high schools and what the students have access to as far as support, and as parents as well for them, because my mother, she didn't have an education background here, so it wasn't really easy for her to navigate that with me, and we missed a lot of the opportunities to advocate for ourselves in the beginning. So I intend to be an advocate for immigrant students and making sure that they do have a fair chance at accessing quality education and taking into account their linguistic proficiency as well.
Good afternoon. My name is Cecilia Guy. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a first-year doctoral student in EPO with concentrations in human resource development and diversity and equity in education. So I come from a healthcare background. I practiced for 10 years as an occupational therapist in a number of settings, from academic to clinical. And one of the common threads that I saw was that the frontline workers, I particularly am looking and interested in the front experiences of Black women frontline workers, but I did see that even though their work was important, it wasn't necessarily valued, not monetarily and not even by the administration and the organization. So I'm very interested in hearing from those frontline workers how they can be better integrated into the systems and the cultures that they work in. So in terms of thinking about like doing this work with them, I think that starting to do the work with them is really modeling the walk that I want the organization to talk. And so when I think about diversity, I think of it less about, it's not just about who's in the room, right? It's also about who gets to speak. And so I would like for people who don't traditionally get to speak to talk.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all so much for inviting us. I can just say that there's so much to say in this forum right now, and just to be able to share with each and every one of you. My name is Susan Ogwell. I am now working on finishing my dissertation, hopefully finishing this semester. So you all pray for me. I am in the EPO education policy and organization leadership side, focusing on global studies education. I am doing my dissertation currently on the higher education and intersection of immigration, African immigrants, particularly who emigrate here and are looking to find work that are comparable to their higher education levels. This came about for me, particularly because of personal experience from my family. I am a native of Uganda. You may not be able to tell because I've been here for so long with my family. We came in Illinois in the early 90s, and we just really experienced a lot of things. Even before that, as a family who came as refugees to this country at a time when there was no ESL formal ESL, I would say, or transitional practices, or what we have today was just not available then. And so watching my parents really work extremely hard, some of you may know them, and they're here too. So hi, Mom, hi, Dad. But just watching them work extremely hard to be able to make a living for my siblings and I. And then also being able to see the successes that they have done, I wanted to make sure that the transition process was just as equitable, if not better, for those who have been coming to the US since our time of arriving here. And so I do look forward to this conversation. And again, thank you all for allowing me the space.
Wow, a lot of passion, among our panelists. So the next question is, so you're literally a part of the communities you research, right? So tell us why that is important. So you have about 3 to 5 minutes per presenter. I'm gonna switch up a little bit. So we're gonna start with Kendra, and then we go to Lynette, and then Susan and Cecilia.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that researching the community I belong to is important because living through that experience allowed me to see some, at least from my experience, what are some of the gaps that I can address or be vocal about and be a true advocate. So for example, having that parental support, knowing that if my mom had the right resources or asked the right questions, it would have been a smoother journey for me. So being able to research and find those solutions that we can practice or at least put in a try and error process, because I feel like these ideas out there, things just need to be tried or a lot of people need to be pulled in. For example, I know that some of the protocols that were in place were to give like a take-home test for parents to understand what languages they're speaking at home. I spoke to my mother as I was doing a project and she didn't remember getting that test, to mark what we spoke at home. So there are literally a lot of gaps that we didn't get to check back on. And even within the school system, I would have questions from my counselor like, hey, what are you doing here? You seem like you're advancing, but you're here. So there was a lot of confusion even within the faculty and staff that were helping me process. So I feel like these gaps that I need to address, and through my research, it's important to be vocal about that. And then one other thing I wanted to add that is important is that for the next generation, for them to not deal with the same issues, because I feel like once we start to embed these practices and see them work, they can have a smoother experience and not have to deal with that. I always like the talk that some people had to walk so others can run. And that's what I really want to see for the next generation and be a part of the change that's tangible and that we can see in students' academic success in their social lives. Because a lot of the times there's also that culture disconnect, which coming from experience back home when we're very reserved and sometimes it's hard to speak for ourselves because I come from an education system that's very authoritative. So it's really hard for us to ask questions. So when the students don't ask questions and the parents don't ask questions, we kind of just get pulled into the same pipeline that I think we need to kind of dismantle through being vocal and advocate for ourselves. That's why I think it's important. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you for that, Kendra. So I am unapologetically researching in a space where it's absolutely me search, because, in very similarly in other spaces in education, career services is no different, where, leadership is not representing the population of students that they serve. And so career services is very similar to that. And, there's a lot of research that we all know that representation is extremely important for our students in the P-21 education space, but I think there's also an opportunity to research how important representation is for each other as colleagues in education, particularly in higher education, and in particular in Hispanic serving institutions. For those that don't know, an higher ed institution can be a federally designated Hispanic serving institution if they have at least enrollment of over 25% of self-identified Latino, Latina, Latinx students, undergraduate students in particular. The HSI designation has been around since 1994, so just a little over 27 years. And so I think, you know, particularly in the career services space, where, as you all know, I'm preaching to the choir, how important career service departments, career development departments are within the student experience. I think there's also an opportunity to talk about culturally relevant pedagogy and praxis within career service, career development departments, and how career development offices can make that impact in ensuring that there is a sense of belonging at an institution. And so in particular to Hispanic serving institutions, I think there's an opportunity to not only increase Latino, Latina, Latinx leadership within career services, career development, and higher ed, but to kind of figure out, you know, what are the experiences of existing assistant directors and more who identify as Latino, Latina, Latinx, and how they use their intersectional identities, particularly their race, class, gender, ethnicity, and culture in providing more transformative career coaching practices versus transactional.
So for me, I would have to say that the biggest thing is the aspect of advocacy. If you had asked me years ago, and most people who are really close to me, if you had asked me probably 10 years ago if I would ever do a PhD, I would tell you, heck no, that is not in my dreams. This is not what I wanted to do, etc. But through my journey at the university, so I got my bachelor's in sociology here and also my master's in education here. And then after that, I worked in social services. And for a while, as I was managing cases, particularly within higher ed, and our agency at the time was managing workforce education grants. We began to see a lot of folks that are coming in who had degrees or education certificates or diplomas from other countries, so they could prove that they were worthy to be hired. And so out of that particular situation, it really began to provide a question for me as to why is this happening? I was literally seeing people who had law school background, people who had medical background, people who had even architecture background. All of this is happening. And I'm thinking to myself, this is just crazy. These are folks who are coming in to try to find work, but their only option right now is to work in a factory. And which is currently, unfortunately, the case in a lot of immigrant communities at this time. So what that then spurred on was that I have to figure out how this is happening and what's going on with that particular issue. And so doing just some basic research, looking around, I realized that a lot of it is coming from the policy level. And so from that point and perspective, that's where my gears have shifted, or maybe not shifted, but extended and expanded. So that for me, I look at research as an opportunity to advocate for the population that I'm a part of, but also to be in a unique position to be able to represent the communities that I'm a part of and speak to them in a venue and in a field and in a space that maybe their voices aren't often heard. I can tell you right now, there's very few African scholars who have who their scholarship has really been highlighted when it comes to immigration. And then oftentimes, African immigrants are still having to beg for a seat at the table when you talk about immigration right now. And so I think this is part of why, at least for me, this contributes to a lot of why I do the research that I'm a part of, so.
I am going to answer the question, but first let me say I'm just really excited to be going behind y'all a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody said all the things I want to say, so I'm gonna try and say it in different ways. All right, bear with me. So I worked in healthcare for 10 years. I didn't think that I would actually be working there that long, but I'm really grateful. I knew I wanted a doctorate. I never knew in what. And I would say like my combined experience is really informed why I feel like I want to do research with, not on, not for, because I worked as a consultant in intermediate care facilities, right? In Texas, for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they have the options, families have the options to have the state take care of their children. So working in those settings with people who are direct service providers, they had amazing ideas. So when I'm supposed to come in and like help create policy for a process, I would ask them what it was they thought should happen. And they will always like be shocked, which to me was really weird because I'm like, you're doing the work. And it was just beyond me that nobody had ever asked them. And they always had great ideas. And so to me, there's something about being able to bridge the gap between what's happening at the administrative or policy level, right? To touch on what Susan said, and what is happening like on the front lines in that with the people who are doing the work. And so it's really interesting to me. I think that I'm in human resources development, but I also see that as one of the places where you get to have that bridge where you are looking at what people are doing on the front line, and you are also having the ear of the administration who gets to make policies that impact what their lives are.
You guys make me want to go back to graduate school because I think I picked the wrong topic. And this is absolutely fantastic. You know, I would be honest with you, I didn't necessarily have the courage to do me research. I'm gaining the courage now to think about the way, you know, my own family and community helped shape the very questions or the way I try to answer questions in the research that I do today. But it's always foundational to how I think about, you know, a person's personhood and how they should have identity going forward. So this is absolutely fantastic. And the one thing I think that is the overarching theme here is the concept community. And for each of you, it has very different meanings. And so it could be family or neighbors or fellow graduate students, fellow researchers, or being a researcher, parent, a resident. Flesh this out a little bit for me. What challenges or successes are present while you're doing the research that you're doing? And, you know, essentially, how do you connect the dots, right, in this regard? And I know for the sake of time, maybe two of you take the time to really help the audience better understand how you better understand that term. And as some of you have already alluded to, the intersectionality of it.
I mean, for me, I hop in, right? I didn't see nobody unmuting. But I think for me, I think about the fact that we are all like living within all of these contexts, right? So in one of the preliminary projects that I did, I talked to some women who were Black frontline healthcare workers, and they said, I'm a woman, right? And I'm a Black woman, I'm a mom, I'm a this, I'm a that, but I also work within this structure that is very hierarchical, and like, I know where I sit. They all said that they were at the bottom. And like, to me, I'm just like, I don't understand how that could be so when you provide so much value socially, when you provide so much value to this organization. I think there's something to me about the quote unquote invisible tasks that people do. And I think that it should be public. I'd also say that like just in healthcare in general, I mean, we're right now in, I think, a perfect time for me to be doing this research, which look at God. But I think about the fact that, you know, nurses have been tired, right? Allied health professionals have been tired. Doctors, right, have also been tired because the way that the system that they got into was really run by money and not by care, which is what they thought they were getting into. And I think that there are ways that we can look at caring for the people within the system who are upholding the system that I think are really important.
Thanks for that. I was just going to add, I guess, to piggyback off a point that I made earlier, is that coming from a place where we don't really question the system or question the things we have in place. One of the issues I'm finding is that the courage for parents and students to speak up or share things that they know are concerns, or sometimes they don't even know it's a concern or it's problematic. I would say at this point, I'm privileged to have my eyes open and see the things that I see that are problematic. But going back and preaching that to the community sometimes, when being here, sometimes, especially we're accessing some of the things that we hold so much value to, like education, but it gets harder that, okay, we're here and now we need to question how we navigate this education system and understand if we're getting the appropriate support or the appropriate resources. So getting the community to understand that we have to question it, or we have to at least be understanding of our needs not being met has been an issue. For example, getting research approval to talk to the parents, to get those honest answers, like how do you really feel? That's really hard, because as a researcher, you don't want to come into a space and impose your views or impose these things that you've realized and come off as, well, I know the solution and here it is, but more so like, what do you need and what is your experience looking like? Because even understanding that within our own communities, there's that intersectionality that we need to address as well. So I think that's one of my challenges, getting the community to understand that we have to have some questions and then advocate for ourselves has been quite the challenge.
I was going to say, I want to follow up just a second on that, if you don't mind, Dr. Lee. Has there ever been a time that any of you have had to wear 2 hats, 3 hats, trying to explain your positionality, whether it's to your advisor or to a principal in a school or to somebody in the community? It's like, have you ever had to say, by the way, I'm getting my PhD in this, you need to back up for a second, or by the way, I'm also X, Y, and Z. I'm trying to get a sense at the break it down for me is what I'm trying to say. These responses are great, but I know there's at least in Mississippi, they said there's a down home response that I'm looking for here.
Absolutely. Just to add on to that, I think one of the biggest aha moments I had was a person in a position of help. But once I had just got admitted, I think I was like in my master's program, and I expressed my interest in African languages and being more vocal about them and making them accessible so students who come with those languages can keep them up. And they said, well, why don't you do, something on German or French, something different. And they looked like me, and they were a Black woman of the diaspora. So I was kind of played back a little bit, not understanding why they were, gearing me away from African languages. Like, well, that research might be difficult to get out there, or, just getting people to participate is harder. So it might be better for these other languages. And it just kind of was one of those moments where I didn't feel supported and almost kind of discouraged in the moment. But I'm very happy that I persevered and just kind of kept on going, because my passion is still just to be more focusing on my African languages and that community particularly.
I will add on to that. So I am consistently challenged in regards to not only the level of scholarship that I have within my research, but the scholarship that I have within even just being a career coach. And I think it has not only a lot to do with my race, ethnicity, and culture, but also my gender. And also my age. So when I say I have over 17 years of experience, I didn't start career coaching at the age of 5, right? So I am constantly having to, unfortunately, lead with my credentials when even I career coach students. And so that they can believe in regards to what advice I am giving to them. And then, so being part of, an institution such as U of I at the College of Education, I call it credential currency. I have to bring that out, especially when I'm speaking to employers. When I'm recruiting employers, I, have to say, yes, I am the person in charge of the department. And so I am the person that you are supposed to speak with when we're trying to develop an employer partnership program with you. So let's chat and let's talk numbers. So that is on an unfortunate daily basis, especially also being a first generation high school and college graduate and mom.
Dr. Lee, I got to interrupt one more time. I apologize. Because Lynette had just said something that I think is important. If she's willing to let me share, that I'd like to share, because I heard some good news about you. Can I share that news, Lynette?
Yes.
Okay, my understanding is Lynette was just recently offered a job as the founding executive career coach at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. So if you're getting firsthand, look at exactly superstar, and I think she just expressed it even more so. So I just wanted to get that in because there was some timing there, but I could have heard wrong. It was that or Domino's. Which one was it? When Domino's, right?
It's a contract. It's a contract. It's a pilot contract, but still really grateful for the opportunity to provide my DEI, anti-racist, and belonging lens to Hugsy, in particular to their emerging graduating students and alumni. So we'll see what happens. But thank you for lifting me in that. Thank you.
Yeah, this is great news. Congratulations on such a wonderful opportunity. You certainly deserve it. I really kind of enjoyed listening to the conversation we're currently having. I know like every one of our try to juggling with multiple roles. I think many of you have mentioned different identities, multiple identities. And then, on top of layer, we also have to wrestle with the kind of the institutional barrier that put in front of us because, we're, in particular for today's panel, women of color. So, you certainly have additional layers of obstacles you constantly have to go through due to institutional racism in this country. So I just want to add a little point before I ask my next question. They're talking about me search in the box, and I want to challenge you a little bit thinking about we search. So bring your sisters, brothers along, do research, right? So kind of expand that, kind of your win and your outreach a little bit more. Just, that's my challenge for you. And so the next question I'd like to ask is, great project, great ambition. So how can faculty in the college education assist you in your research and public engagement efforts? Yeah, maybe the two of you didn't answer the last question, and address this question a little bit more.
I'll start. I will say that, so I came into the college when the college was merging before it used to be just EPS or education policy, and then the organization leadership, I think, on the other side. So I came in at a trend when the department was transitioning, which was great. And what I think we've learned, my colleagues and I, my classmates and I, is that the importance of really being able to understand what research means and having an authentic conversation about that. So I know that faculty are constantly being pulled in so many directions. But I think one of the biggest things when I look back now on all the classes that I took, probably the classes that helped me the most with getting a sense of where I really wanted to go and what I wanted to do was having those research-oriented classes. For me, it was cultural studies and interpretation, or ethnography, thinking about education research specifically. Just look, and for those who may not know those terms, just thinking about it from a qualitative research perspective. And so, or mixed method studies. So just being able to have that there. But also, I think the biggest thing that's made a difference for me is having an extremely supportive advisor. My advisor is Dr. Cameron McCarthy. Shout out to him. He has really been one of those faculty members that has really kind of come in and said, okay, how can we support you in trying to how can we help you support the voices that you want to uplift? How can we make sure that we create a space for you to learn and be engaged, but also be challenged? Because nevertheless, the support also means challenging us as well, asking us questions like, well, Do you think you could do it like this? Do you think you could consider that? And that kind of thing. And so, and he's also not he's one of many, I should say, that is not afraid to speak about some of the larger issues that's happening currently in society and bringing it to the classroom. So I think when I reflect on my experience with the department and with faculty, those are the two major things that have made a big difference for me in terms of the research-oriented classes and understanding what, even down to how to create a research paper. I cannot tell you what it's like to be out of school for 7 years or 6 years or 5 years or what have you, and then come back to grad school after being in a professional position and not knowing, where are we now, because things change all the time within education. So all those things just really made a difference for me.
Okay, so speaking on the other end of the spectrum, like for me, I think there's something that Kendra said that I want to bring back, right? We're thinking about how we live in like these we have like this structure of colonialism, and that does extend into education if we're honest, right? I would like to do participatory action research, which is like the redheaded stepchild of research methodologies, but for me, it means something. So for my advisor and like my instructors along the way, I really appreciated the way that they've said, like, okay, if you choose this, you might have a tough road to hoe. So like, let's fine tune, like, why this? Like, let's get your argument, like, I mean, I'm gonna say Trump tight, because I'm gonna be myself wherever I'm at. Let's get it Trump tight. So when you get ready to explain this to somebody, you could give it to them, like you could give it to them academically, you could give it to them in like that street lingo. And I think that's one of the things, right? I think there's something about the ways that we can be ourselves in whatever spaces that we're gonna be in that our instructors do like help us uphold, right? And I definitely feel like some instructors do it differently than others. I think that people are in different places on that journey of like challenging what they think research is and like what our role as researchers are. So when the instructors are willing to do that, when our instructors are willing to do that same work that we are doing coming in, it creates possibility for us instead of having making us have to live inside the boxes of their expectations.
Were there others who wanted to share? All right.
So
I would tell you. Oh yes, please, please.
So I am honored to say that my husband is also a PhD candidate at the College of Ed at U of I, and he had the amazing privilege at the time to be part of SPI, the Summer Predoctoral Institute, which provided an opportunity at that time a few years ago to engage PhD students to get onto campus, particularly PhD students of color. And I believe at the time you also accepted masters, but I can't recall. I wonder if there's an opportunity to provide that to virtually to EDD students, and as a way to engage EDD students, particularly in the diversity and equity in education program. So I'm, being very biased. I'm sure this will work in other doctoral programs, but, I feel like I missed out in knowing who's part of my cohort because there wasn't an opportunity virtually and systemically to get to know them socially before our doctoral studies started. And so if there's an opportunity to think about that, fortunately through the amazing courses that I've taken at the College of Ed for the past 3 years, I've been able to organically collect sold individuals, but I think there's a way for the academy to do that very intentionally and systemically, such as you've done for PhD students. So something to potentially think about. But aside from that, providing spaces like this to affirm our scholarship as graduate students, and in particular graduate students of color, is amazing. So I'm grateful for the opportunity and hope that we continue.
This is all excellent considerations, but in particular, Lynette, the last one, because I know from experience being a mentor within the SPI program, how it helps build community, which is the focus of our conversation. And so to any ways that we can continue to build a bridge and community, that would be fantastic. And so I know there are many on this a particular forum discussion listening. So we might be plucking all of your brains to understand a little bit better how we might be a little bit better to ensure those kinds of outcomes, because it's absolutely essential. I know personally, I think it's being recorded here that Jessica will take money out of her own pocket to make sure this will work. And so, Dr. Lee, we thank you for your financial contribution to our future endeavors. Kathy, make sure our microphone doesn't come back on. I joke here, but what I'd like to do is transition. We have time for our audience to ask questions. And, we're going to open up the microphones here, except for Dr. Lee's, so she doesn't try to take away her financial incentives. And but we're going to open up the microphone to our audience to get a sense. What questions do you have for our panelists? And I'm excited to hear what they are. You can also type them in the chat, and we'll be monitoring the chat for those who would prefer to write rather than speak. So I'm going to turn my microphone off.
Dr. Span, I just want to also give a general shout out to College of Education faculty. I say this wholeheartedly because when we go out for presentations in conferences all over the United States, one of the biggest things that I come into contact is with other colleagues who rave about the fact that we are so professionally prepared, we know our material and all of these kinds of things. And I think a lot of that is attributed to how our faculty also prepares us to go out there and literally bat home runs when we are at that conference or at that presentation or giving a talk somewhere. So I do want to make sure that we give a shout out to our faculty, because we do realize that we come out, shining a little bit, a bit out there when we're out in the community. So thank you.
Had to wipe away a couple of tears there, but we're waiting for questions. You guys know I always have jokes. I apologize. I'm trying to be professional. So Kathy told me to be professional. Dante, I know you have a question. I know you're out in the audience too. Go ahead and ask a question.
I actually have a question, if I could revisit some of the earlier conversation. This is Alyssa. I'm also a student in the College of Ed, so I second Susan in her appreciation for our faculty and staff, especially you, Dr. Span, for this initiative and allowing us space to have these conversations. So a particular shout out to you for allowing us to do the work that is to resist and disrupt in the necessary ways, academically and otherwise. I do want to ask, though, with the initiatives that you all have in your particular work, thinking on a broader scale, how do you think the institution can support you in building community with the actual community within which we work, teach, and do our work? One thing that I notice as a student here, a graduate student here, is that I want to build a lot of those relationships in the community, but a lot of that work falls on me as an individual and my collective. Shout out to the sister scholars on the panel. So when we put our heads together, this is a lot of the work, but how do you think the institution on a wider level, on a broader level, can support that notion of connecting to our community that is Champaign and Urbana?
Thank you, sis. I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I think that's a great question, which I feel like there's not a particular answer, a right answer that I have right now. But one thing I'd say is getting connected through not only our classrooms. So for example, we're taking a class together with Dr. Dyson, and the tips that she's given or the tips that she's given us in class to get out there, but also the connections or the tips and tricks on best practices on things that's not necessarily here's the syllabus, here's what you have to do, go out there and get it done. But those things that make life easier, because I found that sometimes we do this work with like being a first generation, I've had to do a lot of my own research and get those questions. So getting the appropriate best practices, how you can make the system work for you, because sometimes even when I'm in other groups with other doctoral students or just other graduate students, we find that there's a lot of mental strain on us, a lot of stress on how do I do this? Am I asking the right question? So just getting that grace and understanding like, it's okay, this journey is not supposed to be like life and death, which some of us feel like that sometimes. And I feel like that those anxieties can help when we get connected to the right people, get those best tips and practices, and then have the community and space to talk about things like this, or the space where we can share authentically what our experience is like, and then have those, I guess, not just the best tips and tricks, but have those conversations openly with receiving more like health resources with our mental health and other things that we might need in place to succeed. And I feel like that a healthy community is a stronger community. So being in a healthy mindset and having a space to go and get those the appropriate resources would be great.
I think.
Oh, I'll jump in here and say, on top of that, one of the things that I think we can do is actually bring the community into our teacher ed classrooms. I remembered that, so the community that I serve, which is the African community, has exploded within Central Illinois. And as a result of that, our schools have also changed to really design and have appropriate dual language programs, et cetera, et cetera. One of the things that I see happening, which I think those things are great, and the schools have changed in terms of the elementary school level, is that also then I think that if you invite the communities in, invite the parents in to have just a forum session like we're doing now, and for them to talk to, especially those who are going into becoming teachers in the classroom, to have them have a conversation with the teachers who are being prepared, and to talk about what it's like for their child to come home after having spent a time or day with them in the classroom. What are the things that these parents are expecting? I think a community forum like this would be optimal, because it allows for a good exchange of ideas, but again, more or less a listening session, so that the community members can really share about what is it that they're looking for. Because I can only speak for me and the few people that I don't want to say a few people, but for the people that I represent, but it's not also the totality as well. So I think those kinds of things would be helpful for the college ed and community. So.
I think there's something really I think there's space for us to explore the partnerships that we already have, like not just in the College of Ed, but like within the University of Illinois system, right? Because I think about career services, I think about the multiple community contexts that it must have for students to be able to have internships. Those are places where we get to make those community connections, right? So it's not just I'm coming out here and I'm getting this professional experience. At least I hope not, right? I hope that anybody who is going out into any place is also thinking like, I'm going to meet the people. I'm going to serve these people. I'm going to learn from these people. So I think there's something too about like really creating this attitude where we're not just talking about being lifelong learners, but we're actually doing that through our experiential learning too.
I wonder if there's an opportunity to provide, and I will use the K-12 example, extra credit in graduate school for providing our scholarship in the community. So for example, my family and I live here in Chicago, Illinois, and I very intentionally reached out to the executive director of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center to hopefully partner with them to do what I'm calling a resume clinic with their LGBTQ plus individuals that they serve. They have an actual center, particularly for trans individuals who identify as Latino, Latinx. And I'm waiting to still hear back, but I'm not doing it to get extra credit, but it'd be nice if I don't have to pay for a course because I'm putting into practice and serving my community in a very intentional manner. And at the end of the day, I'm in this doctoral program and in this very privileged space, as a female doctoral student of color, to not only assist me professionally, but to assist my community in having access, right? And to multiply myself, hopefully within the academy, and share my story in regards to, being a first-gen high school graduate to hopefully first-gen, doctoral graduate in hopefully less than 3 years, but we'll see. So just, I wonder if there's an opportunity to do that and, provide credit for a course because we're doing so much work in the community based on our own scholarship.
Yeah, I don't know if right now there's resources that you can get credit for community service, but there are discussions built on the current. There's like a new program called We See You. There are discussions taking place right now, looking at how to kind of match students with their expertise, with what community they serve, and then possibly getting a credit and kind of a course credit with that. There are some discussion clearing going on. I don't know how soon it's going to be implemented, but I think that's a really good point.
I see we have a question in the chat from Miranda Zhao. Miranda, did you want to ask the question or did you want us to ask it for you? I saw Cecilia responded to it. So was there additional clarity or is it okay if we read it?
Yes, I just want to have some discussion on this topic. So, can you hear me?
Barely. Could you repeat what you said?
I want to have some discussion on this topic. I don't have a very specific target to ask about, so would you like to initiate a discussion around this topic?
Sure. I'm going to go back to the question here, and it's the way I looked at it, and I think Cecilia, you look prepared to kind of comment on it. But the way I interpret it is the question is, what do you think are the boundaries of community? And on the one hand, community should be diverse, but on the other, it should be based on exclusive character. But opening it up for discussion or topic, and perhaps you can. Members of the panel can expand on the way they're interpreting the question.
I think community is fluid, right? Because I think that it's based on our positionality. So I'm a Black woman, so I'm a part of the Black woman community. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm a Clevelander. I'm a very avid Cleveland fan. I'm a healthcare professional, so I'm that too. And I think it depends on what space I'm in, because if you're bringing all of your stuff into the space, we talked earlier about how we're wearing all of these hats. Like you go through the hats and wear the one that you need to wear in the moment. And I think too, like when we think about community, especially as researchers, it shouldn't be a them us thing, right? We should find the we in the communities that we're going into, because it's always there. Like, even if we decide that the we is like, we're experiencing some level of oppression, we are wanting to radically reimagine what is happening here, like we are wanting to create another system.
Absolutely agree. And the one thing I've noticed just about community, I feel like sometimes you get introduced to a new community and now you have a new experience that you get to, I guess, unpack and understand that new identity. So I came into graduate school as just a PhD student, and then I became a mom. And that's been interesting, navigating that, being a mom. And then just a lot of things open up, like how do I navigate graduate school as a mom? And, and what can I give to the community as a mom? Like my lessons that I'm learning, how can I help my peers? Because some of them, this is something that they're interested in. And it's just a side conversation, but always wondering, like, when can you start a family in graduate school? What does that look like? And of course, parents in our community, sometimes, it's hard to kind of navigate that. Not understanding how even schedules can be completely different, like how we have to take into account other people that rely on us as we're also going through this journey as individuals. So I think community is, like you said, fluid, and it's also something that can change time after time, and you have to rediscover yourself and see where you fit in that community, but also how others fit in how you navigate it. So
I will also say that in terms of the boundary aspect, I take an insider approach, meaning that there are some things within the African community that folks in our community here have said to me and told me about that I will never share, only because I have decided to draw a boundary to protect that space for them. Before I came to grad school, I had the opportunity, and because of my job, I was able to make a lot of important relationships within our African community, particularly, and also other international communities. And some of the things that we've shared in conversation, I'm not going to take that and say, oh, I'm going to bring that as a research topic. No, not necessarily. Those things were shared in person and in confidence and in a safe space per se. And I think in terms of thinking about our communities and thinking about how we engage with our communities now on this lens as a researcher, that we can make the decision to say, okay, I will include this part, but I'm not going to include this part because I want to protect and preserve the beauty or these particular confidential aspects of our community. Not to say that it's going to take away from the research, but it's really to continue to say, in order to have a positive relationship and to be able to have a relationship that's going to be long and productive, I don't ever want members of the community to feel like they can't trust me, whether I'm an insider or as a researcher. So I do want to make sure that is also said, that boundary is important.
I'm looking at we're running upon the hour here, 3 o'clock, but what an amazing conversation. I'd say let's give it up for our panelists. You guys are beyond superstars. And I love my job. I want to be very clear about that. But I love the fact that you guys are loving your job of learning how to be better components within your community. And you found a way to make your community your work, and not in a negative way, not in just a me way, an individualistic way, but truly in a communal way and sense. So if we think of the universe, we think of the university as being a universe, there's so many different ways that you can become parts of community. And I think many of that and much of that was expressed here, but the most important element I think that has been expressed is just the joy of being. And that in itself can put you places and spaces that sometimes you don't even know you're going to be in. And so keep enjoying your work, keep enjoying life, and you keep being you. You guys are amazing. As the last comment just said, amazing and aspirational. So thank you very, very much.
Yeah.
With that, I'm going to give closure to our panel here. I want to thank you all one more time. We will have one more forum discussion before the end of the semester. We do have a graduate student forum for those who are listening that would love to join us and be a part of that council. We would love to have you, and be on the lookout for the future initiatives and endeavors that we plan on doing collectively together. So I'll end by saying stay safe, stay healthy, stay positive.
Yep. And thank you for a good conversation.
thank you so much for having us. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having us. What a blessing.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.